Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. We are live in Charlottesville, in the Commonwealth, and across the country on the I Love CVille Network. We're presented and powered by Ting Fiber, crazy fast internet. If you want the best, it's Ting. It's what we use to power this network. ilovecville.ting.com gives you a $289 savings, actually. Dave Norris, moments away, former mayor, steward of the community, just a good guy to be around. We will welcome him to the program in about 15 seconds. First, we give props to this guy, Judah Wickhauer. Why don't we go to the studio camera, J-Dubs, and folks can see that very handsome back of the head of yours, and maybe the hand in the air. We know we like to do that. Judah Wickhauer keeps us on track. Judah, on that note, why don't we remind the viewers and listeners that the show is interactive. So if you have some perspective that you'd like to offer, questions, comments, put them in the Facebook section, in the comments section, just like Maria Poole has done, sending Dave Norris 3 heart emojis right now.
She's a sweetheart.
From Maria Poole. On that note, Judah, let's welcome Senor Dave Norris to the program. How are you?
Jerry, it's great to be back. It's the first time back in studio since, spring of 2020.
Pre-COVID.
We've done it by Skype a couple times, but it's good to be back with you in person.
You know, the last time we did it was the Election Day show on November 3rd, 2019.
Is that right?
When the two of us had the candidates coming in.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun.
That's right. That's been a while.
Right?
Yeah.
How are you holding up? Okay, I ask everybody this question.
Yeah.
How's the mental health over COVID?
No, I feel like it's good. I was the first half of the pandemic, I was sort of lying low and just kind of, I was hunkered down just like everybody. And then I decided about halfway through the pandemic that I was just going to get off my butt and train for a marathon. And that really occupied several months of my time and got me exercising, got me active. And I ran a marathon about a month ago now. And
congratulations.
Felt good. So it was my second marathon.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up using a lot of my downtime.
Did you make it the whole, is it 26.2?
I did, 26.2 miles, okay. Down in North Carolina on the Oak Island.
Cool.
Great race.
You know what the hardest part of COVID, there's been a lot of difficult aspects of COVID. The uncertainty, the vulnerability, the unknown, undoubtedly. But for folks like us, it's missing the human connection.
Oh, it's huge, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's great to see people starting to come back out now. I feel like there's kind of this, gradual return to normalcy. We're not there yet, obviously.
Sure.
We're not going to be there for a little while, but people are coming out of their shells a little bit. And with the weather improving, it's, seeing signs of life and signs of hope and optimism. And so that's definitely great to see.
A lot we have to cover with the former mayor of Charlottesville. He's got a new job. He's, I'm going to say, a political pundit. Certainly knows politics in Charlottesville, I'd say better than most, if not all. I've said on this show that this may be the most important election in Charlottesville history, with the city manager, with the West Main Streetscape, with school reconfiguration, with this parking garage fiasco, the relationship with Albemarle County. We're still trying to solve affordable housing. We're still trying to solve reliable public transportation. A lot on the agenda. We'll put all that to a side for now and talk the career. How about what's going on?
Yeah, so I just started a new gig a few weeks ago with Piedmont Housing Alliance. I've been a big fan of Piedmont Housing for years. I actually used to serve on their board many years ago, and they've kind of taken the lead on creating what's called a financial opportunity center for Charlottesville, for our community, where it'll be kind of a one-stop shop for financial stability supports for anybody who's struggling financially, needs a little help repairing their credit or getting a better job, getting some job training, getting better housing, managing their household budget, setting up a savings account, checking account, whatever it's going to take to help that individual, that family become more financially stable. Right now, all those things require you to go to multitude of different offices around the community.
Sure.
We're going to bring them all under one roof. Make it as easy as possible for people to get the help they need to get back on their feet, to climb the ladder.
Cool.
And so we're working on finding a space, physical location for this financial opportunity center, and then bring all these pieces together under one roof and rock and roll. So it's going to probably be late spring, early summer before we actually open our doors. But I'm really excited. It's got great potential. It's based on a national model. There's about 100 of these open around the U.S. I actually helped to get funding for the first 3 FOCs, Financial Opportunity Centers, in Virginia, down in Richmond. So I'm familiar with the model, and I know that it works. And I'm excited to see one come to fruition here in Charlottesville.
I love it. So once it's up and running, what can community members expect?
Yeah, so you'll be able to walk in the door, you have people greet you, meet you where you are, like in a non-judgmental way, like how can we help you become more financially stable? And so we'll have Ridge Schuyler's program, Network to Work, will be located there. So if you need access to better employment, living wage jobs, job training, adult education, anything that's going to help you improve your income, you can get help there. If you need help managing your household finances, as I said, repairing your credit, we'll have those services available. If you need help getting better housing, whether that's rental or maybe saving up for home ownership, PHA and their housing counselors will be located on site. If you need help accessing public benefits, employment supports, other things, those resources will be on site. So, and then we can just grow from there. You know, we're already talking to other service providers about what other resources we can bring on site. And just be a sort of a powerhouse for financial stability for our community.
That's fantastic. You're getting props from, is it Guaga Agnes?
Oh, yeah.
Maria Poole says, if anyone can do this, it's you. Andre Xavier is giving you some love. Ty Hines, Stacy Smith, Kelly Campbell.
Good people, good people.
Both TV stations watching you and the CVille Weekly. This gig seems to fit everything you stand for in this community.
Well, I like to think so. It's sort of the culmination of a lot of work I've done. You know, I spent the last few years working on public housing revitalization. This is directly tied to that, so I'm not leaving that arena. It's just, but when we talk about investing in neighborhood revitalization and neighborhood development, it's not just about bricks and mortar and building better housing, but it's also investing in the people who live in those communities and helping them climb the economic ladder. And so anybody who lives in public housing in Charlottesville that wants any of the services that I just mentioned can come to wherever we end up opening up, are welcome and encouraged to come in and pay us a visit and see what we can do to help them move up the ladder.
So Neil Williamson is watching.
Good man.
Free Enterprise Forum. The cool part of the show is if you have questions for Dave, put them in the comment section. I will relay them to him. You've touched on this already, but Neil says, can you speak about the geographical footprint of the center?
Yeah, I mean, primarily Charlottesville and Albemarle, although I don't know that we turn anybody away, but it's going to be located in the city, probably within close proximity to downtown, just for ease of access. But it's primarily Charlottesville and Albemarle, we're not going to turn people away if they're 1% over, 80% of area median income, whatever. Like, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible to meet the needs of the community.
This is from Grace, who lives in Fluvanna. She says every community would need something like this. Why not something for Fluvanna? Any plans to scale the model?
That'd be great. So there's a statewide organization called LISC, L-I-S-C, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. That's the sort of umbrella organization that's been planting these FOCs, Financial Opportunity Centers, around the country. They started with 3 in Richmond, now 4. They're just doing one in Hampton Roads. Now we're doing one in Charlottesville. So yes, it is a replicable model, and there's no reason why down the line we couldn't have one in Fluvanna or Louisa or anywhere in the state. So.
Broad, open-ended question.
Sure.
Many ways to go with this answer. COVID and the impact on our most vulnerable population in this community. What have you seen?
Well, I will say it's certainly, obviously, the economic downturn took a huge hit on people, and we had a lot of people lost their jobs, lost their incomes, and created tremendous hardship. I don't want to minimize any of that. However, one thing I will say, this is a very giving and loving community, and people really stepped up. Philanthropists, local, state, federal governments, individual volunteers, donors, just everyday citizens. People stepped up to support those who were hurting over the last year, and I think it brought out the best of Charlotte. You and I have always been bullish on Charlottesville, and so what we saw was. Even people who were falling behind on rent, people stepped up and said, we're going to cover your rent. We're going to make sure you don't lose your housing and end up homeless. We're going to make sure you have food on your table. We're going to make sure, your kids are taken care of even though they're not in school. So people really stepped up. Does that mean nobody ended up falling through the cracks? No, unfortunately, we do have people that fell through the cracks. But this community really rallied together, and that was just tremendous to see.
Your friends in Ghana are watching you on the show here. They wanted to make sure I emphasize that on the show.
All right. I love Ghana. Kathy Galvin.
Watching the program.
All right.
Barbara Lundgren says, hello, we love Dave Norris.
Well, I love Barbara Lundgren. She and I do a lot of weddings together. So.
Dave is, I say this, and I embarrass him a little bit, a Renaissance man.
Well, I don't know about that, Jerry. That might be overstating.
You wear many
things just
hats.
a little. I do wear a lot of hats. Yeah.
Tell us about the hats.
Yeah, so I do have a side gig as a wedding officiant, which I love doing. I started that when I was mayor. People asked me to perform their wedding ceremonies, and then even after I left office, people kept asking me. So I've done over 600 weddings now. It's a nice little side gig. You know, when I started, I had 2 kids that were going to college, and I just needed that little extra income. You know, help with college expenses, and yeah, and I love, like I said, I love doing it. It's great to be part of the wedding community here in Charlottesville. We've got a tight-knit group of wedding professionals, people like Barbara and others who, you know, Charlottesville really has over the last decade become this great wedding mecca, and it's just exciting to be part of that moment when a couple is, you know, tying the knot and starting a new future for themselves.
How's the wedding community holding up?
You know, it was a rough year. 2020 was a rough year. I lost, at one point, there were several months where I lost, I would say about 80-90% of my weddings just because people were either canceling or postponing. But it's starting to pick up. You know, some of the measures that the governor put into place didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So, for instance, right now, you could have an indoor church wedding, church wedding, and have 200 guests, and that's perfectly allowed. If you want to have an outdoor wedding at Veritas, Vineyards, Pippin Hill, you know, Keswick, any of these places, you're limited to 25 guests for an outdoor event.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, right? And so I know a lot of wedding professionals are lobbying the governor to try to bring some rhyme or reason to that, because if anything, we should be encouraging people to be having outdoor events, you know, in the age of COVID. But we're coming back, and I really give props to all the couples who've just, you know, I had couples that postponed 3 times their wedding because every time they thought, all right, we'll be in the clear now, we'll be in the clear now. But they're sticking with it, and 2021 is going to be a good year for weddings, particularly summer and fall. We're going to be slammed, and that's a good problem to have.
Well, welcome to CVille Weekly to the broadcast. They're watching us now. If you have questions for Dave, please put them in the feed. Your State of the Union for Charlottesville, Virginia, in what, the end of March in 2021?
Yeah, no, I think things are moving up. As I said earlier, I'm bullish on Charlottesville, and I just think you know, signs are pointing in the right direction. Right, I think we're gradually coming out of the darkest days of this pandemic, and you see business activity picking up, restaurant activity picking up. As I said, weddings are picking up. I heard the other day, I don't know if this is, maybe I shouldn't say this, I heard Fridays After 5 is going to be happening this time. Is that true? Or?
Yeah. Kirby is going to he's going to beta test it to start,
right,
where it's going to be more ticketed to control.
Okay, right.
And then if the beta tests go well, then potentially Fridays at the end of the summer.
So that's a great sign. You know, I feel like we've turned a corner. We're not out of the woods yet. I'm mixing metaphors left and right, but anyhow, I think we're heading in the right direction. And it's been a tough year, and we have reason to feel optimistic and feel good about having come out of this. And we're still strong. We're a strong community. People did step up. And I feel bad for everybody who did take a hit this year. I took a hit. A lot of business people, a lot of individuals, a lot of employees, a lot of people took a hit. But I think we're going to come out of it, and it's going to be, you know, later 2021 is going to be a good time to be in Charlottesville.
Brian Susia is watching. Jerry, I love the show. I try to watch as much as possible. Please ask your guest what he thinks of the job the governor has done during COVID.
So I would say mixed reviews. I think. As I said, some of the restrictions to me didn't always make the most sense. You know, I think the initial stages of the vaccine rollout were really not handled as well as they could have been. That's not unique to Virginia, but I feel like at one point we were in the bottom tier of states, which, you know, for
it's
Virginia,
shocking when he's a doctor.
Right. It's a doctor and a state that's, you know, we've got so many great medical institutions here, we've got so many great medical people here, like you'd think we would. But I think we've caught up, you know, and so we're doing much better now on the vaccines. But it's been a tough year to be in public office. I don't envy anybody in state government, local government right now, federal government for that matter, governing in the middle of a pandemic. I was mayor during the Great Recession. I thought that was tough, but that's nothing compared to what these folks have had to deal with. So I don't want to be a backseat driver and say, you know, the governor should have done this. But, you know, I think in general it's been a mixed bag, but I think we're definitely moving in a better direction now.
You are beloved by just about everyone in this community. I'm seeing it on the feed.
I don't know about that, Jerry. But
Tom Bowe of Take It Away is
yeah.
watching now. He says,
All
hey,
right.
Dave Norris, isn't it cool that the White House press secretary is a William & Mary graduate
I
as
love
well?
Go Tribe. Yeah, absolutely.
Ty Hines, giving you
Hines,
props.
yeah.
Make Charlottesville, Virginia great again. Re-elect Dave Norris as mayor. He's the only mayor to make a difference in a positive way for the citizens of this town. He also created a job for me when he was mayor through an organization called Patcham.
Yeah.
He created a job, and I'm thankful for him. God bless Dave Norris.
Wow. Thank you, Ty. I appreciate that.
Why don't we talk election?
All right.
You and I, political junkies.
We are. Yeah.
Brian Pinkston, Carl Brown, Juan Diego Wade, and Yaz Washington.
Yeah.
The 4 on the Democratic ticket.
You think there'll be any more?
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
The deadline's fast approaching, right?
I know. I haven't heard of any other names, but I'm just curious. So yeah, it's an interesting slate of candidates, and
I mean, it's a wide spectrum, right?
It is. Life experience, age, professional background, and they're all solid. I know 3 of the 4 fairly well. And you gotta assume Juan Wade's been on the ballot before. That's always a good sign. If somebody has been on the ballot, people have voted for them, people have shown their confidence in them. That's always a good indicator that they're going to do well when they move up to another office. It doesn't always guarantee they'll get elected, but
you're referencing school board there.
School board.
Okay.
So Juan Wade's been on the school board. He's been elected. He's had pretty strong campaigns. Been elected pretty strong margins of victory, and he's a solid guy. He knows the community. He's been around. People know him. People trust him. I think you got to assume Juan Wade's in a pretty strong position. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, right? But he's a good guy.
The Standardsville odds makers have Juan Diego Wade a heavy point favorite.
Is that right?
In fact, if you bet 100 on Juan Diego Wade to get in city council, you only win 50 on that particular situation.
Right.
Brian Pinkston, his second go. Yaz Washington, 23.
Yeah.
Carl Brown, a lifer here in the community. Let's just talk out loud here.
Sure.
Nothing is guaranteed. This is for the sake of a talk show.
Sure, absolutely.
The tea leaves would suggest that Juan Diego Wade is a heavy favorite to get one of these 2 spots.
I think that's safe to say.
How do you look at the other seat and how it will play out?
Well, Carl Brown, he's got his background in the community. A lot of people know Carl. They like Carl. He's got a lot of family here. He's got a lot of friends here. He's got a little history here. He's got fascinating, biography. You can't discount a guy like Carl Brown, and he's putting his pieces out, just from having seen him on your show and just having talked to him offline. He's putting the pieces together for a campaign that I think is going to be I think he's going to be tough to beat. But Brian's done this before, and that always helps if you've been around the block once and you know what it takes to put together a successful campaign. So he's got a little seasoning, and sure he's going to work. He worked hard last time. He knocked on a lot of doors. He really did talk to a lot of people, and then Yaz is impressive. She's an impressive young woman. She's got fire in her belly. Can
you imagine us at 23?
No,
we were doing at 23?
No, I don't even want to think about it.
She's running for council.
I know. It's great. It's great to see. I love to see young people get involved and get engaged. And I've known Yaz since she was a child.
Really?
And I worked with her mother for many years. Her mother's one of my favorite people in Charlottesville. So. Yeah, it's a good slate, and then on the independent side, we haven't heard if Mayor Walker is definitely going to run again. I know she said sometime last year that she was
earlier this year,
or
back and forth with me on Facebook.
Okay, there you go.
She said I have a campaign to prepare.
Well, there you go. But she would obviously be tough to beat just because she's the incumbent mayor, and she's got a lot of support in the community. I know she has some detractors as well, but she's got a lot of support in the community. And so if I were an odds maker, and if it's Nikiah Walker on the independent ticket and any of those 2 Democrats, I would never bet against Nikiah Walker. She's tough, and she's a force to be reckoned with, and she's so.
Can you help us understand the value proposition of being the incumbent?
Sure. Mean politically? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it certainly helps. Like, name recognition is huge, right? you have a track record, and people will either support you or not support you because of your track record. But it's no longer hypothetical. It's not like, I promised to do X, Y, or Z. She can show what she's done, and she's done some impressive things, And so she's got a track record. She's got name ID. She's got this. I talk about Brian, like she's been through a campaign before. She knows what it takes. She knows the ropes. There's no learning curve for her. So there's definitely a lot of attributes that she would bring to the race. She's got the eye of the public because she's in office now, and so that gives her a platform, to push her ideas, and so she would definitely be a tough one to beat. It's hard to unseat an incumbent mayor. However, again, she's not running as a Democrat, and Charlottesville is a very Democrat-heavy community. Sure. This was the argument last time when she ran, and some of us were telling her, you have to run as a Democrat. She says, no.
You said the same with Bellamy.
Yeah, well,
with Bellamy Brown.
Well, Bellamy, I think...
Because he ran as an independent.
He did, and I when I heard that he might be running again this year, and then I guess decided not to, part of me was like, yeah, you should run as a Democrat this time. But he's his own guy, and I know he's got some other irons in the fire. But I'll be just as fascinated as everybody else to see how this all plays out in November, and how the primary plays out in June, I guess, the Democratic primary. And there's still plenty of time for other independents to throw their hat in the ring. My guess is there will be some. There always are, or there usually are. So
you have two members of the Board of Supervisors watching you here on the show of Albemarle County. Throw this to you. What's the strategy or the science behind if you're a Carl Brown, a Brian Pinkston, and a Yaz Washington? You have potentially an incumbent mayor running as an independent, and you have a heavily favored school board tenured guy in Juan Diego Wade.
Right.
If you're those three and you're offering advice to Washington, Brown, and Pinkston, what is that advice?
Well, right now they can't even think about November. They just got to think about June, right? Okay. And so
June 8th.
June 8th is that the primary date? So and there's a recipe for success in a Democratic primary or in a primary, and what tends to drive election outcomes is name recognition. You got to have a compelling biography and sort of a rationale for your candidacy. Carl Brown, I love him to death, but he comes on your show and he tells great stories. And I was trying to get, last time he was on your show, I'm like, give us your elevator pitch, give us your biography, and really hone his message, because a lot of people who aren't from Charlottesville necessarily don't know Carl Brown, and so he's got to refine his messaging a little bit. Brian needs to really help us. I talked about compelling rationale for your candidacy. He needs to help us understand, what's the fire in the belly with Brian Pinkston? What's his message? What would he try to accomplish on city council? He's got a solid biography background, professional background and whatnot. He's been involved in the community, but help us understand what are you going to do these 4 years to make this a better community. And then Yaz is, I think she's doing a great job of getting, honing up on the issues and refining her platform. And she's got a fire in the belly. And so any of those three could be that second nominee.
You mean that?
Yeah, I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I do think Juan is in strong position, but you can't count. You can't count on that, right? We have had people before who I thought were going to be shoo-ins and didn't end up performing as well as I thought for sure. Amy Lawfer
and Heather got it
right.
Yeah, and that was a surprise.
It was a surprise, but Heather worked her tail off.
Yeah.
She was just focused. She worked her tail off. She had a strong message, and it paid off.
Christina Connor, welcome to the broadcast. Sarah Duquette, Todd Fiskin, Drew Parker, and two writers from the Daily Progress now on the stream. Brian Pinkston, he's running for a second time. Does that work against him or work for him?
No, I think it works for him because, again, name recognition is important. When he ran the first time, I don't think a lot of people had heard his name or knew much about him. So now that he's run once, it certainly helps. And also just he's familiar with the process now. He knows what it takes to put together a campaign. So it absolutely helps him. And we have seen it before. Wes Bellamy ran once, lost, ran again, won. Bob Fenwick won.
Ran twice. Right?
Twice, right.
And then
then won the third time.
As a Dem, previously was an independent,
right? Independent, right.
Yeah.
So having that experience can really pay off in the long run.
Do you think how do you look at the November 3rd election? I've said it's maybe the most important one in the history of Charlottesville.
Well, there's a lot at stake. I don't know if I would say that, but it's definitely a lot at stake. And you mentioned the city manager. That's a major, the person in that seat has just as much power, if not more, than some city councilors, in terms of the direction of the city. And so the next council is going to hire a permanent, hopefully long-term city manager.
Would you go Chip permanent? Because right now Chip Boyles is the interim.
Yeah, I don't know if Chip wants it permanent. I mean, I don't know Chip, so he could just see himself as a placeholder. I don't know. I'm not in his head. So, but he seems like a solid guy. He did a good job with the Planning District Commission. But yeah, hiring a city manager, major infrastructure, as you mentioned earlier. This school reconfiguration one is huge. Like, it's hard to overstate how massive a project. I mean,
we're talking $100 million.
I was going to say, like, in the newspaper, they talk about like a $50 million project. It's going to be at least double that, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it should, honestly, because here's one thing that I know used to bug, like, Ned Mickey and others that used to be on the school board. They're watching, Fluvanna County, other counties in the rural parts of Virginia building these brand new high schools and brand new school facilities. We haven't built a new school facility. We haven't even done major upgrades. We've fixed up our buildings, but we haven't done major upgrades to our school buildings in decades, And so, and in parts because this reconfiguration budget item's been sort of hanging out there, and nobody's really championed it and made it a priority. And now it feels like it's coming together finally, but it opens up the possibility to massive infrastructure investment and massive improvement in the school system, more importantly. So big decisions on spending, big decision on taxes, big decision on planning, big decision on city manager, other staff positions in City Hall as well. So it's a lot at stake.
We talk often on this show about perception being reality.
Yeah.
And I guess the perception, this is coming from me, it's not coming from you. The perception is that there is some dysfunction amongst leadership. We know we had a national search committee pull out from the CEO, the city manager search process, and they cited the dysfunction as the reason of pulling out. What do you make of that? Is that fair?
I felt like that was the wrong call of a search company.
Because you're saying they should go through that dysfunction.
I mean, the dysfunction we have here is nothing compared to dysfunction you see in bigger cities, and people. Yeah, I mean, so I was really shocked when I saw that they were pulling out. I mean, Charlottesville can be. Particularly after August 2017, there's some rough and tumble. There's definitely some tough issues that have been raised and that we're grappling with, and that causes friction sometimes, and sometimes that's necessary friction. When you're talking about racial equity, when you're talking about undoing centuries or decades of systemic injustice and inequity, that's gonna really cause people to get anxious, and it's going to cause frayed nerves, and it's going to cause hurt feelings, and it's going to cause some difficulty, and that's necessary difficulty. It's like John Lewis calls it good trouble, right? Like, and you got to have personnel and others that can deal with that, And if this consulting company can't navigate that, then they're not the right consulting. I'm sorry. I mean, they might be good people personally, individually, but that company was not a good fit for Charlottesville.
Sure. From
my perspective. So, having said that, I do think there have been some issues on council. There's no denying just interpersonal strife among council, which I think they're working on now. They're trying to address, and so that they are a more effective working body. But it helps having that a more stable city manager position, that position filled, some other things coming into place. So I think it's moving in a good direction.
What do you make of, I learned from Kathy Galvin, who was there about 3 weeks ago. And guys, Kathy Galvin's going to host the Democratic debate on this network on April 6th. She will moderate the debate and ask questions to the 4 candidates from the Democratic Party who will be here for about 2 hours on this network. It's Tuesday, April 6th at 12:30. She taught me, or she offered some history of the West Main Streetscape project, which certainly kind of overlapped with your tenure. She said the West Main Streetscape project has been in the works since 1988.
Well, I know there's been talk about it for a long time. Not the project in its current iteration, but yeah, there's been talk for many, many years about upgrading that whole stretch of the urban core.
An important corridor.
Vitally important.
Yeah.
And, one of the big philosophical decisions that was made during my tenure was, there used to be this informal rule that we were going to stop UVA from developing any further east than than the Battle Building, that corner of JPA and West Main.
Okay.
And we're basically going to hold them.
Okay.
Because people didn't want all that real estate being taken up by a potentially tax-exempt entity that wouldn't be paying taxes to the city. And my perspective, and I had a series of meetings with university officials at the time, my perspective was, at the time, that was largely a wasteland, right? Okay. And you had vacant lots, you had rundown buildings, and I'm like, I would rather see some development than to see it sit empty or underutilized and in poor condition, even if that means the university does start creeping eastward, because at least they're creating jobs, they're creating economic activity, they're creating activity on the street. And so I think that was in hindsight, it was a good decision. And so we've seen university investment and university-related investment occur. Kathy and I think, both agreed that architecturally it could have been done better, particularly on the one stretch with the
towers.
The towers.
Yeah. What is it? The Uncommon or whatever it's called now. World of Beer was that?
Yeah, World of Beer. What is that?
The Standard.
The Standard. No, I don't forget. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's changed names.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of this shadow alley now, or wind alley, but I think the idea of having the university and university-related investment occur in hindsight was a good thing. But there is other infrastructure. There are other infrastructure needs in that corridor. However, I think people like Michael Payne make good arguments that maybe we don't need to do all of it now. Like maybe we can do some of it now, particularly where there's state matching funds that we can draw down on. But maybe some of it we can put off, because there are other huge infrastructure needs, like schools, like housing, like public transportation. We need a new fire station. We need, there's other things that, and you can only tax our community so much before you start making even more unaffordable. So that's the biggest job of a city councilor, is figuring out how to balance all of these things.
Can you walk us through that mindset? Because we're in a time when the budget is super strapped. We've had Councilor McGill and Councilor Payne have already gone on the record and say, prepare yourself for a real estate tax increase. We're at a deficit. We have to do this. Walk us through how council manages a deficit while also being patient and in tune with citizens.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is you've got to be responsive to the community, but you also have to make wise use of tax dollars, right? And and sometimes that means making politically unpopular decisions, like deferring projects or canceling projects, or but that's what we elect these people to do, is to make these tough decisions. And you have to balance out the needs of the community. You also have to look at who's benefiting from these projects. West Main, some of the wealthiest property owners in Charlottesville are going to be the ones that benefit the most from the West Main Streetscape project, right? So there's an equity issue there. And I'm not saying don't do the project, but I do think there's Michael Payne and others have made some arguments as to why we may not do it all at once. But and then you have needs like housing, affordable housing, which we've been neglecting. I mean, we've gradually stepped up over the years, but we largely have neglected the working class of Charlottesville, who's being priced out left and right, and it seems increasingly so. Like housing now, there's this, because the things are turning a corner, and which is a good problem to have. But housing. We're hearing those stories again of houses going up for sale, and I had a friend who had a house up for sale, 12 cash offers in 24 hours. I mean, it's insane. Like, and there's bidding wars on houses that 5 years ago were considered subpar, and so we've got to keep, we've got to be mindful of the folks who are struggling to stay here in Charlottesville, that want to stay here in Charlottesville, but are being priced out, and that's both rental and home ownership. So housing has to continue to be a priority. We've already talked about schools. We want to make sure we're investing in public services, fire, police, others. So it's tough decisions to make, and I don't envy any of them, but Charlottesville is always, I would say for Charlottesville, we've had a pretty good track record over the years of making good fiscal decisions. And that's why we have a AAA bond rating. It's why city finances have been strong. When I was in office, every year we ended up with a surplus. It was just, trying to make good decisions with limited resources.
Our friend Ray Cadell,
yeah, I love Ray
is
Cadell.
giving you some props.
He's a good man
right now. Yeah. Michelle Tanner, hello. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, Michelle.
The relationship with the city and the county.
Yeah.
I wonder how it's going to be tested with the parking garage potentially not becoming a reality by deadline when Councilor Lloyd Snook, who's an attorney and very much invested in the legal community, when he now goes on record and says, maybe we don't need this parking garage after all, right. When of any of the five, he's probably the one that screams the loudest from Carter's Mountain right. That we need this parking garage.
Well, it's going to be...
there's a backup plan.
It's a little easy to say it now because there's no parking demand, or relatively little parking demand.
And you know this because you manage parking.
I used to, yeah. And so now we're in because parking is down in both garages, now we have the luxury of being able to breathe a little bit, and we don't have, but if and when the economy does,
because it seems to be coming back.
Right. And if more and more people are going back into the office to work, and that's another question, is that, this work from home thing, to what extent is that going to be the new norm? We used to talk, when I was in the parking business, we used to talk about self-driving automobiles as being the one thing that could end up killing parking garages. Now it's like people working from home. Is that going to be, you've got State Farm now going almost all virtual, at least the one office out here. So, is that going to, and if that plays out, that's going to really...
So it almost sounds like, and I'm not assuming,
yeah.
That's why I'm asking, it almost sounds like you are maybe even pro the garage here.
No, I'm actually not. I'm just saying that it's the environment is much different now, which helps to explain why Lloyd Snook would say, maybe
let's wait.
We don't. Right, let's wait. Yeah. Let's see what happens. That's so I understand that line of reasoning. And
that's what you would do if you were in
office?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would put it on the back burner and just see how this plays out. And if they do build it, I like what Rory and others have been talking about in terms of
Rory Stolzenberg,
more of a mixed use kind of a facility instead of another giant parking garage or whatever, medium-sized parking garage, but do a creative urban infill project there that includes parking, but also includes some apartments or retail, commercial space.
Frank Bickers says Dave is a man about town. Jerry, can you ask Dave your take on the open-air refreshment area for the downtown mall?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I love it.
So you would do it?
Absolutely, in a heartbeat. I know you've been talking about this for a long time. It's the kind of thing I think you were even talking about before COVID, because we need that. I think downtown
draw.
We need that draw because all the other retail centers that have been opening up, Fifth Street, Stonefield, others. We need people who want to come downtown, enjoy downtown. So something like that to me is a no-brainer. I would approve that in a heartbeat.
So I'll follow up with this. Yeah. If that is potentially approved, we're just talking out loud, we're spitballing for a talk show.
Sure.
If that's approved and consumer confidence is upticking, could we potentially have a logjam down here? Traffic-wise, parking-wise?
Sure. That would be a good problem to have.
Yeah, it would be a good problem.
And we were sort of heading that way,
we were.
Before COVID, particularly with the new office buildings coming online. That was if you think back to when this new parking garage was conceived, it's when you've got
Co-Construct,
right?
Code, Joffrey's building, Apex,
yeah. All these new facilities coming online, Jaffrey's building they're projecting, or they were at least 600 some employees, but they're only building 70, I think, parking spaces.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so there's, if and when all these projects come online and the economy comes back up and more people are coming downtown, you're going to see more pressure to build that garage. And I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying it's going to create a different dynamic.
This is an interesting comment. David Swanson, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us. This is from Chris Friedman. He says, should the city of Charlottesville be fearful that its tax base is moving away from Charlottesville?
That it's tax-based. Well, employment-wise, it's not. I mean, again, we've got employers creating jobs in Charlottesville, building new facilities. UVA is growing. So employment-wise, the city at least I think is doing okay.
I think he's doing this because a work from home, you don't need to come into the office
Right.
anymore.
Okay. No, that's a legit question.
Yeah.
As I said before, is that going to be the new norm? Does it make sense to build a 600 office or an office building for 600
That's what
employees?
I think it is,
Right. I think that really does create a different dynamic, and I don't know that any of us are smart enough to know how exactly that's going to play out and how that's going to impact our economy.
Is that a city councilor's job?
Well, the city has an Office of Economic Development that's supposed to advise them, and an or Economic Development Authority that's supposed to advise them on these kinds of things. And so I think they're all sort of trying to figure out, how does that impact planning? How does that impact decisions on infrastructure spending? How does that impact traffic planning, public transportation? But we have to assume, I think everybody has to assume that Charlottesville is going to continue to be an attractive place for people to move to retire to start a business here, to recreate, to get married. And I think if we work from that assumption, we'll make good decisions in terms of managing the growth and not just, putting our head in the sand and pretending it's not going to happen. It is going to happen. I think Charlottesville's on the map in a good way. And as we're making decisions and accommodating that growth, we have to absolutely make sure we are also accommodating the needs of think about like a Carl Brown, somebody who grew up in Charlottesville, his family, his extended family.
Preston Heights.
People who are being priced out, gentrified.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to make sure that Charlottesville continues to be the community they call home as we welcome new investment, new businesses, new jobs, new growth from the university. And it's a delicate balance, but I think we can pull it off.
Regina Paul watching the program, CBS 19. We enjoy when you watch the program. It's interesting. I look at Charlottesville. I've been here 21 years, came here as the first year at UVA. Mm-hmm. And from my time then, and I was not obviously nearly as involved or engaged then as I am now. Mm-hmm. But I remember even then we were talking affordable housing.
Yeah.
We were talking reliable transportation that connected Central Virginia. Mm-hmm. We were talking about how to create diversity in this community. They continue to be the topics we talk about
because they're still here. There's still needs. They're real challenges, and housing is one that we've made good progress on, but we've come nowhere near to solving, but the good news is that there's a lot of really smart people who are in that arena, and great organizations. I now work for Piedmont Housing Alliance. Piedmont Housing Alliance has been doing some excellent work. The housing authority's really been stepping up. Habitat for Humanity, those guys are rock stars. Like AHIP, there's other organizations that are trying to wrestle with this issue, but even the collective investment of all these organizations in time and energy and money isn't enough. We need the city to continue to step up. We need the state, the federal government. It's all hands on deck to make sure that the people who do the hard work of making the city function can actually afford to live here and stay here and raise their families here, and this doesn't become just a playground for the wealthy.
Multiple people have said, Jerry, please bring Dave back.
Anytime. I'd love to be back.
When you're on the show, I look at the clock for the first time and 45 minutes go by. We're 45 minutes in.
Wow.
Thank you for joining us.
No, Jerry, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Can I reach out again?
Anytime.
Thank you, Dave Norris.
All right.
Yeah,
Good
we
to
appreciate him. Dave Norris, guys, former mayor of Charlottesville and just a champion and steward of this community. Judah, I will reach out to Alex Urpí now, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. That front door may be locked. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Dave Norris. Alex Urpí joins us on Tuesdays to talk market and also to preview his show on Thursday, which airs on this network, Today y Mañana, presented by Emergent Financial Services. I'll tell you, Alex, every time we bring you on this show, there's a serious heavy hitter right before you, and every time you come on this show, you meet expectations, you surpass them. Yet again, you have a heavy hitter in front of you, and Dave Norris.
I was watching. It was impressive.
My friend, the show is yours. Let's throw this to you here. Open-ended question. We're at the end of March, the end of Q1. How are markets doing now?
Well, they definitely seem to have stabilized slightly. Today, it's a little wobbly because there's news on oil, there's news on out of Europe, there's news. They're waiting to see what the Treasury Secretary and Powell from the Fed are both speaking today. They may be even continuing to speak now as we're speaking, but a lot of news on that. Things seem to have calmed down. slightly, which I think is good news. You like to see things to be calm, although because they always say that markets go up like an escalator and down like an elevator. So escalators are always calmer than elevators when they're tumbling downwards. So we like to see that, and I think it's just patience is what's going to be the key. I think this year, because I think this year, as opposed to last year, right? You have that collapse in March, and then you basically have what looks like a V. I mean, the markets look like a big V, and so you kind of knew what to expect going there, because when you collapse 94% of your economy and then you slowly try to recover, like you have a general idea what's going to happen. This year, I think there's a lot more, how do I say it, uncertainty in terms of how quickly we are going to approach reopening. Like, because I mean, Europe is backtracking. The United States, obviously, we're looking positive, but you never know how things are going to turn out. So I think the key for this year is going to be, can you hold on? Can you not panic? Can you not sell before you have to? Don't sell at the small dip when things are going to recover, but be wise. Don't ride something to the bottom. So I think all those things that we talked about in terms of how to properly invest and really think about the long term are really going to come into play this year, because I think there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty in what happens. There's going to be ups and downs.
Alex Urpí, CEO, Emergent Financial Services. Alex, this time last year, we're starting COVID. We're starting lockdown. Everyone is freaking terrified. Markets are, read constantly on the television this time last year, and people are literally freaking out on television, on CNBC, as we're watching COVID hit the world. What have we learned? It's a two-part question. Over this year, what did you learn as a finance guy? And then what did we learn as, say, people, as a country over this year?
So I'd say for me on finance, I would say last year was a really good lesson in terms of the dichotomy between the stock market and the underlying economy. As if that wasn't already, there were hints of it. I think if you have been following the market, there were hints of it post-2008 when the stock market return in the early 2010s did not coincide with the actual economic growth picture. But I think that was completely highlighted as a lesson for people to sort of be aware of last year, that you cannot really, in the age of the Federal Reserve and the age of central banks, you cannot look to the underlying economic picture to make a 100% correlation with what the stock market is going to do. You could not look at that picture in March and April of 2020 and say, I need to stay out of the stock market for 2020 because the economy is going to be shut down for months. Because if you had done that and you had pulled out and gone all the way to cash, you would have missed out on an enormous boom from basically March to December, from that bottom to that top again. And so I think that's really important for people to keep in mind, because there used to be a time when, the economy impacted the markets. And I think we're somewhat in a reverse, not that there's no correlation anymore, but there are very strong forces in terms of what is said by the Fed, what is done with monetary policy, what's done with stimulus. The government did things last year that, granted, it was an unprecedented time, but there were unprecedented actions. We'd never seen before the government saying, I'm just going to write checks to everybody in the country and see what you do with them, right? And so that's a huge change. I think it's important just for people to keep in mind, because we always talked about black swans, right? And the key with the black swan event, which is basically an event that you can't foresee coming, is that you can't look to the past to predict the next one. You can't say, well, 2008 black swan was housing, so 2020 black swan is going to be housing. And you can't say 2020 black swan was COVID, so the next one is going to be another pandemic. So you just have to be constantly thinking ahead of what could impact, what could be different, what's not the same as it was before. And I think that was a big lesson for me last year, to be able to look at that and say, goodness me, the correlations that I studied to become a financial advisor, a lot of those correlations are not holding true anymore. And so you have to be cognizant of that.
Great answer right there. So you're alluding to the separation between Wall Street and Main Street. And that gap and you're the pro, I learned from you, I learned from Xavier and Emergent Financial Services, that gap appears to never be larger from my standpoint. Wall Street and Main Street here. You got in 2020, you got the rich getting richer, and then in 2020, you had folks that were living on the margin financially who were already vulnerable, say someone that worked in restaurants. I was in Charlottesville. Before the pandemic, folks that were working in restaurants were living paycheck to paycheck and were screaming to all of us, we can't afford to live here. Then during the pandemic, they can't go to work and earn money.
Yep.
I mean, talk to us about this, anywhere you want to go on this.
No, I mean, it's a serious challenge to consider that we can no longer, we can't really look to 401ks to say, well, the 401ks are doing well, ergo the economy is doing well. Because it's not necessarily the case anymore. And I'm not discounting, as someone who believes in long-term, like, my job is to make sure people are in good shape in retirement. I care what happens to their 401ks. I want to see them go up, right? But I think it shows that in reality, we need to put so much more focus, I think, on the local. And this is what my father and I are really passionate about, is because, you know what, Wall Street and very large corporations, your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Apples, they provide good services, but they can never replicate the kind of care and concern for community that local businesses have. And so if you are relying on Wall Street and their success of large multinational corporations to make sure that people living in Charlottesville are going to be secure, that they can afford to live here, that they can have good jobs, good wages, it's not going to happen because there is no direct connection there. And so you need to really think about, we need to really think about, and we've been pushing this since 2020, I know you have also, just the power of buying local, the power of thinking twice. Do I want to buy this from Amazon, made in China, even though it's $10 cheaper, or do I pay another $10 and buy it locally from someone I care about, knowing that that money will return to my community, that it will help them, it will help the people they employ, and then it will come back around and help the people that I know and love that live around here. And that takes a challenge. I mean, as someone who's been working in finance, I've seen the Buy American trend for the last 10 years. And it's always comes out there. You see the American flags, Buy American, and then you just watch the stock prices of the Walmarts and the Amazons and all these other places, and you say, well, it's clearly not panning out in terms of dollar decisions. And at some point, people have to sort of say, you know what, I need to vote with my wallet, and not with my Facebook posts and my calls for Buying American. I need to, when I go to the store, I need to say local, not local, and make a decision with my wallet. And I know it's a hard decision. It's not easy for everyone to say, hey, I'm going to pay more money to buy things that I need to buy them locally. But it takes all of us sort of paying a little more to be able to get to the point where we'll all be more successful. That as that, rising tide comes in Charlottesville and in local places around the country, I think there's a lot to be gained, and we may reach the point where, yes, it required us to shell out a little more at the beginning, but we benefited from it at the end. And I think it's something really to think about as this dichotomy widens between Wall Street and Main Street, that Wall Street, as important a service as it does, and I'm not discounting the value that it provides. I mean, these companies are successful like Amazon for a reason. They fill true needs, right? As true as that is, there is never going to be the same level of connectedness and concern for who we are in Charlottesville in New York City and in Wall Street. It's just never going to happen.
Great take from Alex Urpí. Questions coming in via Twitter. This is an interesting one. This is from Steven. Jerry, I enjoy the finance talk on the show of late. Ask your guest, with the benefit of hindsight and retrospect, what do you think the federal government and the markets did well and did not do well during this pandemic? That's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. I mean, it's the challenge, I think, is, in hindsight, my suspicion is that some of the lockdowns preventing people from working were not implemented correctly. And what I mean by that is there wasn't too much thought put into what's the impact of what we're doing on people we have deemed non-essential, but to actually make this country run. I mean, let's face it, restaurateurs were deemed inessential. But if just thinking of my communities that I know in Charlottesville, that's a lot of essential people there. That, I mean, they may be deemed unessential, but the money that they need to survive, the work that they do, the people they assist, just their neighbors that they help, the people that they're able to connect to, that's a lot of people that lost a lot, and businesses that were destroyed and unable to come back. And I think sometimes we have this false dichotomy of it's either the economy or lives, and not realizing that long term the economy is lives. I mean, when you're talking generational wealth, you're talking poverty breeds worse health outcomes. Poverty breeds food insecurity. So pushing
drug
people into
addiction,
poverty,
suicide.
drug addictions, suicide. So pushing people into poverty is, in order to save their health, is maybe not exactly as clear a picture as we would want. I mean, I think the government certainly did some things correctly. I mean, they definitely reacted to their own lockdowns and said, we need to do something about this. We need to do paycheck protection program. We need to implement programs that appear unprecedented because we've taken unprecedented action to shut everything down. So I think they've done some things right, and the implementation should always be better. I mean, I'm glad that at the beginning of this year, we're sort of seeing some recognition that PPP needed to be aimed more at actual small businesses and not businesses that are
Loaded.
very large, somehow fit under the word small.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there's some recognition. We're learning as we go. I just think it's important. The number one takeaway I would say to keep in mind is we lost a little bit of track of how much small business and just people earning that paycheck to paycheck, how much their health and their lives depend on that, and that we don't want to hurt them to attempt to save them, in a sense.
That was a damn good take. Professor Ken Elzinga just scored him an A++ on that take right there. More for you. I like this. Have we felt the impact, Alex, of trillions and trillions of dollars flooding the American economy yet?
Ooh, probably not yet. I think we're seeing it a little. I think the Federal Reserve knows what's ahead. I think Powell just said today that he expects, as the economy revs up, inflation to increase, but that he doesn't think it will get out of hand. And I'm a little curious as to how he can make that kind of prediction. But I think the two things to keep in mind: one, I don't think we've seen the full impact yet because the economy is not at full throttle yet. So, I mean, we've poured a bunch of money into the system, trillions, and we may not be seeing it because the economy is still somewhat in a semi-lockdown / nervous state. On the other hand, I would say don't overestimate the possibility of inflation. And what I mean by that is you look at 2008, 2009, and the $4 trillion that we just pumped out of thin air into the economy, and every economic metric, everything I learned in Econ 101, Econ 102, Econ 201 would have said, you pour $4 trillion at that, you were going to see massive inflation. And from 2011 to 2019, that did not happen. We did not see huge inflation as it's typically defined. I think you could argue we saw it in places like Wall Street. We saw it in stock buybacks. We saw it in other areas. But I think it's very tempting to look and say, oh my goodness, we're going to see hyperinflation because we've spent an unprecedented amount of money. And I would just say to be cautious about that in terms of taking long-term action, because what the last decade has shown us is that the old rules don't seem to apply right now. Doesn't mean they never will. Doesn't mean we'll never hit the wall and finally it'll come. But I think we have to be a little more cautious because I know a lot of investors left the market in 2011 expecting hyperinflation. They went into gold, they went into other places, and that didn't exactly pan out. There was a huge opportunity cost for leaving the market and going into gold in 2011. And so just to always keep in mind that what happened in the past may not necessarily replicate. Even though I do think we have yet to see the full impact, I think the question is, what's the impact going to be? Where is the inflation show up? Because it may not show up in the dollar in terms of prices going up the way we are accustomed to over the end of the 20th century.
Okay, so this one comes via Instagram, and it's not necessarily finance, but I think you can offer some perspective here. It's from Jason Shiflett. He says, can either of you answer me this question? Why did we prioritize the Lowe's, the Home Depots, the Walmarts, and the Targets of the world, and then we cut the Ace Hardwares out here in Fluvanna and the Martin Hardwares in Charlottesville out of the picture?
Oh, that's a good question. I know. I can tell you what, if Xavier was here, he would certainly be a little more bombastic than I'm going to be on this topic. But I think part of it, the cynical part of me would say Martin's Hardware and Ace Hardware don't have the kind of sway with people in positions of power that the Lowe's and the Home Depots do. And I think part of it is also, again, our misjudgment of the word essential. And I think we interpreted essential to mean, the big companies, the Walmarts and stuff, where you go get the groceries, where you get the tools, where you get the supplies. And we failed to recognize, what's essential. What creates most of the jobs in the United States is small business, not big business. It's tempting to say Walmart's essential because it's a supermarket.
It has everything.
It has everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. At least my take is I think that was the temptation, and they went down that path. And I think one of the big lessons we always have to keep in mind, which is being reiterated, but somehow we always seem to forget it, or we forget it. I'll put that in little quotes there. Seem to forget it in crises, is that by far most of the jobs in this country come from small business. And that's where the real success of the American economy is, not from the big ones.
I love this guy, Judah Wittkower. I absolutely love this guy. Is there a shift happening out of big tech into cyclical stocks? Are we seeing that? And is that something that's going to continue to ride throughout 2021 as the economy reopens? Are we going to be jumping into the Boeings and out of tech? Or is this just something that's happening in Q1?
Well, I'd say right now I'd classify more as a catch-up. And what I mean by that is cyclical. So defensive companies, the Boeings, your Dow Jones, basically, those types of companies, they lagged last year. The big dividend-paying ones, they lagged the return of the S&P 500, which is increasingly dominated by tech. You have to remember there was a point last year where a quarter of the S&P 500 was for stocks, which was Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, FANG. So five securities of this. Alphabet and Google they're both in there, but it's the same company essentially. But 5 stocks dominated a quarter of the S&P 500, and they're all tech. So the S&P 500 raced to the end of the year, and the big dividend-paying guys, your ExxonMobils, your Johnson & Johnson, they lagged. So I think we're seeing them catch up a little bit as people recognize maybe tech wasn't doing that much better. It's not like tech was making that much more money than some of these other companies, right? Whether that's going to be a total cyclical change and continue to the point where Dow is going to start outperforming S&P 500, that's difficult to say because, long term, there's still a lot to be had in tech. Long term, there's still a lot of revolutions happening in there. There's still a lot of great ideas happening. It's not like Plug Powers and your Teslas and your clean energies. It's not like they suddenly have bad companies and they're not thinking of any new ideas for the future. They're still doing it. They're still working on it. I think what happens is when there's nervousness, when there's people taking some gains, you sometimes see that shift back into the dividend payers, because when you've had your 100-200% gain and you sell, but you still want to be in equities, well, where do you move? You say, well, I'll take my 3% dividend, and get paid cash every quarter while still being in the market. So tough to say where it'll go from here, but I think what we're seeing is I would classify it more as a catch-up right now than to say, it's a total cyclical shift.
Alex Urpí, CEO, Emergent Financial Services, co-star of Today y Mañana, Thursdays, 10:15 a.m., I Love CVille Network, with the affable and likable Xavier sitting shotgun. What's the plan for Thursday morning?
Thursday is going to be fun. So we've got 2 gentlemen from Brazos Tacos.
Oh, you got it? Nice.
Yes, we've got some Brazos Tacos coming in on Thursday. So we'll talk with them about what's going on, how the business is going. We're going to have someone from Pristel Noel State Farm Agency Stephanie is going to come in, talk about what they're up to. She's another part of that. I told her like a dream team, because at this point there's so many great Latina entrepreneurs at that business that Christelle has there. So it's going to be exciting to see more about Latina entrepreneurship, how that works for them, what are some of the things they think about. And then, of course, my dad and I, there's always going to be some kind of finance back and forth that we'll run into. We're playing a little bit by ear. There's so much news out there lately, like with changing times and topics. And to be honest, talking with you on Tuesdays is so much fun. Sometimes it gives us new topic ideas, because I'll get off with you, and then within 5 minutes, Xavier's going to be coming over and saying, "Why did you say that, Andre? We're going to have to talk about that on Thursday."
I think last week he said you took one of my ideas and said it was yours.
Yeah, that you did. He did say that. But I mean, he can't help it. We share ideas.
Yeah, you're the same company.
Exactly, like father, like son. I mean, we always have to use the we of Emergent. It's like a hive mind in here that we sit together on Mondays, and like the three brothers and the one father, sort of like hive mind. And then our mother calls, and the real genius actually pours into the.
Where would Mrs. Urpí be at the conference room table?
Oh, there's two heads of the table, so one of them would have to be Mrs. Urpí.
Hey, you are so fun to chat with. I so much enjoy this. I mean, initially it was going to be like a 10-minute segment, and I think I always go 2.5x the time with you because of you, man. I mean, I cannot wait for Thursday's show. I cling to your show. Literally. I mean, it's a passion, but I cling to your show and how approachable you make a complicated topic. It's Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. It's Today y Mañana with Alex Urpí and Xavier, presented by Emergent Financial Services. My friend, we will see you in less than 48 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. This was fun, as always.
You have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. Well, that's the show. That is the show. Thank you for joining us on a great day to be alive. And remember, if you are above the mud, rejoice. If you're above the mud, rejoice. A glorious day to be alive. My name is Jerry Miller. For Dave Norris and Alex Urpí and Judah Wickhauer, this is the I Love CVille Show, presented by Ting Fiber Internet. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care.